I need you to pay attention right now. Not in the passive way you scroll through videos. Actually stop and listen, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of thing that happens to real people who work real jobs their whole lives and save real money. And it almost certainly happened to someone in your circle, or it's going to. And when it does, you're going to wish someone had said this out loud before it was too late. I'm Marvin. I'm 64 years old. I spent 37 years as a motorcycle mechanic in Dayton, Ohio. Not a dealership technician, a mechanic. The kind of man who built engines from scratch, who could diagnose a carb problem by sound from 20 feet away, who knew every Honda, Kawasaki, Yamaha, and Suzuki model that came through the shop between 1987 and 2022, well enough to close his eyes and tell you where the bolts were. I retired with $485,000, which was my savings plus the sale price of my half of the shop I'd co-owned for 18 years. That money represented 37 years of calluses, grease, and the specific satisfaction of a man who worked with his hands and built something real. I moved to Bangkok in 2022 to start a motorcycle dealership. I had the knowledge, I had the capital, I had a local business partner lined up, and I had Duangjai, who I thought was my partner in every sense of the word, and who turned out to be the reason I'm sitting here talking to you about this, instead of still running that dealership. By September 2023, 22 motorcycles were gone from my showroom, not stolen in the night, sold, during operating hours, with proper receipts, by the woman who had the keys, and the money went to an export operation I knew nothing about, and that the Thai commercial vehicle trafficking unit tells me has been running the same scheme in Bangkok's motorcycle district for 6 years. So, let me tell you how this happened. Pay attention. I grew up in Vandalia, Ohio, the son of a factory line worker and a school cafeteria manager, and I was the kid who was always in someone's garage, taking apart whatever engine would sit still long enough. The mechanic career was not a plan so much as an inevitability. The manual work, the problem solving, the specific satisfaction of understanding exactly why something didn't work, and then making it work again. I never went to college. I didn't need to. By the time I was 25, I was making more money than most of the college guys I knew. Because people always need their machines fixed, and they will pay a man who knows what he's doing. I married Carol in 1990, in a small ceremony at her parents' house in Kettering. We had 2 kids, both grown, both doing well, both living their own lives in the way that means you see each other at holidays and talk on the phone on birthdays, and mostly know that the other person is there without the daily structure of being in each other's lives anymore. We had the kind of life that looks ordinary from the outside and felt, from the inside, like exactly enough. The house in Vandalia, the kids' school events, the summer weekends at Cedar Creek Lake, the gradual accumulation of a life that fit the people living it. When I was in the shop, Carol was doing what Carol did, which was teach elementary school art for 23 years and make every room she was in better than it was before she got there. I worked on engines. She put color into things. Between us, we covered most of what a person needs to be covered. Carol passed in 2017. Cancer. We got the diagnosis in March and she was gone by September. And I am not going to tell you that the speed of it was somehow a mercy, because it was not a mercy. It was 18 months of watching someone be systematically taken away from you, and then their absence where they had been every day for 27 years. After the funeral, I went back to work, because work is what I know how to do. And I worked for the next 3 years with the specific blankness of a man who is filling time rather than living it. My business partner at the shop was Kevin. We had co-owned the place on Wagner Avenue for 18 years. A solid partnership built on the fact that Kevin handled the business side and I handled the mechanical side, and neither of us tried to do the other's job. Kevin had left the shop in 2019 to pursue an import business in Bangkok, and in the years since he'd been back to Ohio 3 or 4 times and talked about Thailand with the steady enthusiasm of someone who had found the right place for the particular life he wanted to live. After Carol, with the kids grown and the house empty and the shop something I was maintaining rather than building, those conversations started landing differently. I went to Bangkok in October 2021 to look. Just to look, I told myself, and I meant it. But I also went knowing that the looking was a cover for something larger. The question of whether there was a version of the next 15 years that was genuinely different from the version I was living, which was the quiet maintenance of a life that had lost the thing that made it worth maintaining. Kevin met me at Suvarnabhumi and took me directly to Wang Tonglang. I met Duangjai on the third day of the visit. Not romantically, she was the sales agent at a Honda dealership on Ramkhamhaeng Road that Kevin had taken me to look at the used inventory. She was 29, professional, spoke excellent English, and had the kind of fluency in the motorcycle sales world that you only get from working in it seriously for years. She knew the market, she knew the prices, she knew which models moved fast and which sat on the floor and why. I was impressed by her knowledge the way I am always impressed by people who genuinely know their trade. Kevin pulled me aside afterward and said, "She's one of the best sales agents in that district. If you open a dealership, you want someone like that." I came back in March 2022 with the intention of setting things up. Kevin and I had a partnership agreement for the dealership. He would handle the Thai business registration and the local supplier relationships. I would provide the majority of the capital and the mechanical expertise. We found a shophouse premises on a side street off Ramkhamhaeng that had good frontage and space for a 12-unit showroom plus a workshop at the back. The lease was 95,000 baht per month, approximately $2,600. I put in $180,000 of initial capital for the premises deposit, initial inventory, tooling, and operating cash. The business registered in March 2022 as a Thai-registered company, with Kevin as the Thai shareholder of record, because foreigners cannot hold majority ownership in a Thai commercial company, and me as the technical director and majority foreign interest holder under a shareholder agreement. Duangjai came to work for the dealership in April, recruited by Kevin on a salary plus commission structure. She had left the Honda dealership and she came with 4 years of customer contacts in the area and a reputation in the district as someone who could move units. She was, in the first 3 months, everything she had appeared to be: professional, hardworking, customer-facing in ways I could not be, because my Thai was limited and she was fluent, and her numbers were good. We were shifting 8 to 12 units a month within the first quarter. Listen to me, she was good at the job. That's the part that matters, because if she had been mediocre or difficult or problematic, I would have seen it. But she was good, and being good at the job was the access mechanism. The better she was at the legitimate part, the more I trusted her with the operational parts. The more I trusted her with the operational parts, the more access she accumulated. The access was what the family needed, because it was never just about Duangjai. Her family ran an export operation out of a warehouse in Lat Krabang, the industrial district east of the city near the airport. They had been buying second-hand and gray market motorcycles, units of uncertain provenance, which is the polite way of describing motorcycles that had moved from a dealership without a legitimate sale, and shipping them to markets in Southeast Asia and beyond. Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar. Markets with high demand for Thai model bikes and limited documentation requirements on imports. The operation had been running for 6 years when I arrived. All they needed was a consistent supply source, and when Duangjai got the keys to my showroom, I became the supply source. But you have to understand how gradual this was, because that's the thing. It wasn't obvious. It was months of normal before the abnormal started, and when the abnormal started, it was incremental enough that each individual irregularity had an explanation. The relationship between Duangjai and me became personal in June 2022. I am not going to pretend this isn't relevant, because it's the most relevant thing. An older Western man, 2 years past losing his wife, working in a city where he doesn't speak the language, and a younger woman who is genuinely skilled at her job and who starts showing personal interest in him. That's not a complicated equation. I was not a stupid man. I am not a stupid man. But I was a lonely man, and lonely men make different assessments than men who are not lonely, and this is exactly what the scheme counted on. By August, she was spending nights at my apartment in the Lad Prau area. By September, her brother was working part-time at the dealership helping with inventory deliveries. I noticed this, the way you notice something that changes slowly rather than suddenly. One day the brother was just there, helping load a delivery, and then he was there more regularly. And then Duangjai said he needed the income, and he was reliable, and it would save us a hire, and I said that seemed fine. I should have said it did not seem fine. But I said it seemed fine because she was the person running the showroom for me, and she had just moved in a way that felt like we were building something. And men who feel like they're building something don't want to be the kind of man who blocks progress over small things. The brother was the logistics coordinator. In November 2022, Kevin came into the dealership on a Monday morning and said something was off. He'd been working remotely for a stretch, handling the supplier relationships, and hadn't been in the showroom for 3 weeks. And when he walked the floor, he said the inventory count looked short. I looked at the physical count and compared it to the sales records, and the numbers were close enough to explain with normal sales variation. We were moving units at a good rate, and my documentation systems were not as tight as they should have been. Kevin said, "We need to get a proper inventory management system in here, something that logs every unit by VIN and updates in real time." I said he was right. Duangjai said she would look at the options. The inventory system was never implemented. Each time I brought it up over the following 4 months, there was a reason. Cost, timing, the current system was working well enough. Looking back, I understand exactly why the inventory system was never implemented. There were other things I noticed in those months and filed incorrectly. In December 2022, one of our regular service customers, a fleet manager for a delivery company in the Lad Krabang area, who brought 4 bikes in for maintenance every 6 weeks, mentioned, in passing, that he'd seen a truck taking units out of our side entrance at around 8 in the evening when he was driving past. He said it so casually, just a piece of local observation rather than an accusation, that I relayed it to Duangjai as information rather than concern. She said there had been a late pickup by a corporate client who had needed the units urgently before a trip. She'd approved it. She'd meant to mention it and forgotten. I accepted this. I wrote it down. I kept a notes app on my phone with anything that seemed worth remembering, and then did nothing with the note. In January 2023, the bank account showed a receipts figure that was lower than it should have been relative to the units we'd moved that month. I raised this with Duangjai, and she walked me through the sales records, which showed legitimate sales and the right totals. What she didn't show me, and what I didn't independently verify, was the bank account transaction detail that would have shown whether those sales amounts had actually landed in the account. I accepted the sales records as the reality and didn't run the comparison against the bank deposits. A man who had co-owned a shop for 18 years understood that he should have run that comparison. A man who trusted the person managing the books for him didn't make himself do it. I didn't make myself do it. The new phone appeared in January, Duangjai's, a noticeably newer model than the one she'd had when she started. I asked about it. She said a bonus from a large commission sale she'd made in December. I looked up the December records. There was a large sale in December. I did not verify whether the commission amount was consistent with the phone's cost. Of course I didn't. The motorcycle appeared in February, her brother's, a new Honda CB500 that was beyond what a part-time logistics employee would have been able to purchase on his salary. I noticed it when he arrived at the dealership one morning. I commented on it. Duangjai said he'd had some savings and had been wanting one. I said nice bike. I went into the workshop. That's who I was in February 2023. A man who noticed things and found reasons to keep noticing them without acting on them. Because acting on them would have meant confronting something in my relationship that I was not prepared to confront. And the relationship was the thing that had given the Thailand chapter its meaning. And the meaning was the thing I could not afford to lose, because without it I was just an older man in a foreign city who had left Ohio because he couldn't figure out what to do with the rest of his life after his wife died. I know that. I'm telling you that because I think that's the most important thing in this whole story. And it has nothing to do with Thailand specifically, and everything to do with the specific vulnerability of a person who is filling a hole. I want to tell you about a specific afternoon in February 2023 that I have thought about almost every day since. I came into the showroom unannounced. I had been at the workshop for a service appointment with a fleet client and finished early. There were 2 men I didn't recognize loading 3 motorcycles into a truck backed up to the side entrance. I asked what was happening. She said it was a bulk corporate order, a company in the logistics sector, buying for their delivery fleet, and she had already processed the sale in the system and was just coordinating the pickup. I looked at the truck. It had no company livery. The men loading the bikes weren't wearing anything with a company logo. The paperwork Duangjai showed me looked like a standard sale invoice. I checked the total against what the bikes should have been worth at our standard price, and it was plausible. I let the truck go. And I walked back through the showroom, and I told myself I had almost done something embarrassing, that I had nearly interrupted a legitimate corporate sale because I was tired and jumpy and looking for problems that weren't there. I remember I was wearing the old green jacket I'd brought from Dayton, the one I'd had for 10 years, because the Bangkok February mornings are surprisingly cool before 9, and the workshop was cold. I went to the workshop and I didn't think about the truck again until Kevin came to me in March. Kevin had been doing the monthly reconciliation, and he came to my apartment on a Saturday with a printout and a look on his face that I recognized from the years we'd been business partners, as the look he got when he had information he didn't want to have. He sat down and he put the printout on the table and he said, "Marvin, we're missing 22 units. Not 22 units short against projections, 22 units short against the physical inventory we should have had, based on everything we'd purchased and everything that was documented as sold." There were 22 motorcycles that had entered the dealership through legitimate purchase and that could not be accounted for through legitimate sales. I want to slow this down because the next 45 minutes in my apartment on Lad Prow Road are the kind of thing that deserves more than a summary. I took the printout from Kevin and I looked at the numbers, and I did what I would have done in the Ohio shop if Kevin had brought me a discrepancy. I worked through the arithmetic again myself, line by line, looking for the error. Purchase total, 187 units across 11 months of operation. Documented sales in the system, 142 units. Physical count on the floor that Kevin had done that morning, 23 units. 187 minus 142 minus 23 equals 22 units unaccounted for. I ran through the number 3 times. The number was the same every time. Kevin had already done the preliminary work before coming to me. He'd pulled the security camera footage, which Duangjai had access to, and which we later determined she had reviewed and partially deleted on a rolling basis over the previous months, but which still had enough intact segments to show a pattern. Late evening exits, the side entrance, the brother's truck. He'd cross-referenced the purchase ledger against the bank account and found that the sales revenue for the 22 units had not appeared in the dealership account. He'd found, in the partial camera footage, the truck that I had let go in February. It was the same truck in multiple segments, across multiple dates, not a corporate fleet purchase, a recurring operation. I remember that while Kevin was showing me the camera footage clips on his phone, there was a fan running in the bedroom that had been making a slight rattle for the past week. I'd been meaning to tighten the blade mount. The rattle was all I could hear for a moment. Funny what you notice when everything else is too big to immediately process. I put the phone down on the table and I said, "How long?" Kevin said he estimated the operation had started in late October, based on the inventory gap between what he'd seen on the floor in his last visit in September and what the records showed. Late October was 1 month after Duangjai's brother had joined the logistics team. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after Kevin left. The 22 units. At an average retail price of 85,000 baht per unit, we carried a mix of new and good quality secondhand. The value was 1.87 million baht. At the exchange rate in March 2023, that was approximately $54,000. Plus the cumulative sales revenue that had been diverted rather than deposited, another 800,000 baht, approximately $23,000. Total theft from the dealership operations, approximately $77,000. This was money from the business, not from my personal accounts. But it was money I had put into the business, and money the business had earned, and money that the business needed to continue operating. I called Duangjai. She answered on the first ring and said hello in the way she always said hello to me, which was the way that still makes me angry when I think about it. The warmth that was there, the genuine quality of it, that coexisted with everything she was doing. I told her Kevin had done the reconciliation, and I knew about the units. There was a silence, not a long one. Then she said, "Can we talk in person?" I said, "Yes." "Come to the apartment," she said. "I'll come tonight." She did not come that night. She did not come the next day. By the third day, her number had been disconnected, and her personal items were gone from the apartment. The brothers' logistics access had also been terminated. Kevin had changed the door codes the day after our conversation, which was the right call. But by then, it was already too late for the codes to matter. Kevin filed the police report while I sat in the dealership counting what was left. The Thai commercial vehicle fraud unit had, as it turned out, been building a file on the Lat Krabang export operation for over a year. My dealership was one of several Bangkok motorcycle businesses that had been sourced. This did not mean the case moved quickly. It meant there was a file that was now larger. It did not mean I was going to recover the motorcycles or the money. The bikes were almost certainly already out of the country. Kun Prasert confirmed what I expected. The recovery prospects for the physical units were essentially zero. My brother Dale called from Ohio on a Wednesday evening that week. I told him what had happened. Not in detail, in outline. Dale has the specific quality of the younger sibling who has spent his life watching his older brother make decisions, and who has a very clear sense of when those decisions were correct and when they were not. He listened to the outline without interrupting and then said, "Are you okay?" I said I was okay. He said, "I don't mean the money. I mean, are you okay?" I said I was working on it. He said, "Come home when you're ready. There's no rush, but there's also no reason to stay." He was right on both counts. Kevin, when we sat down and went through what this meant for the business, said what needed to be said. The dealership could continue if I reinvested the shortfall. I had the capital to do it, but reinvesting into a business that had just demonstrated that its operational security was insufficient to prevent this kind of loss, in a country where my legal options for recovery were limited, at 63 years old, I did the calculation. The dealership closed in May 2023. Kevin and I dissolved the partnership without bitterness. He had not been part of this, and had caught it as early as it could have been caught. The losses were mine to absorb. The financial audit I did in the closing week was this: initial capital investment of $180,000 into the dealership, of which approximately $103,000 was recoverable through the liquidation of the inventory that remained, the tooling, and the deposit return. Net loss on the dealership investment, $77,000. The theft from operations, $77,000. Total loss, $154,000. Combined with my cost of living in Bangkok across 14 months, approximately $28,000. Total cost of the Thailand chapter, $182,000. Remaining of the original $485,000, $303,000. I'm back in Dayton. I'm working part-time at a shop I consult for 3 days a week, because sitting still has never been something I've managed well, and it's not going to start at 64. My brother Dale was decent about the whole thing, which is what brothers are for when you've done something you feel foolish about. The dealership space on the side street off Ramkum Hang is presumably occupied by someone else's business by now. I haven't checked, and I'm angry. I want you to understand this. I am specifically, usefully, productively angry in a way that is not about Duangjai personally, but about the conditions that made what happened possible. And I want to use that anger to say some things that I think other people need to hear before they end up in a version of this situation. Listen, if you are a tradesman, a mechanic, a builder, a fabricator, an electrician, anyone who has built a career with their hands, and you are thinking about opening a trade business in Thailand with a local partner or employee, the skills that made you good at your trade are not the skills that protect you in this context. Your mechanical knowledge, your ability to assess the quality of a machine, your operational competence in the workshop, none of that protects you from inventory fraud. The protection against inventory fraud is systems, paper systems, digital systems, audit systems, things you implement before you give anyone keys to your building, not after you notice units are missing. Do not give physical access to your business premises to any person who does not have a vested financial interest, a genuine, documented, legally enforceable financial stake in the honest operation of that business. Access equals opportunity, period. I gave Duangjai keys to my showroom because she was the sales manager and she needed them. I gave her brother access to the logistics function because it was convenient. Access without accountability is an invitation, even when, especially when, the person you're giving it to is genuinely good at their job, Because genuine competence at the job is exactly what justifies the access in your own mind. Implement inventory tracking before you open your doors, not after. A digital inventory management system for a 12-unit showroom costs a few $100s and an afternoon to set up. Every unit should have its vehicle identification number logged at acquisition, its status updated at every stage of the sales process, and its final disposition, sold, transferred, or physically present, auditable in real time by someone who is not the person with physical access to the units. This is basic. This is not sophisticated. I knew how to do this. I chose not to do this because Duangjai had a better system in mind, and I trusted her to implement it. The system she had in mind was no system, because no system benefited her. Have an independent business partner or accountant who is not your romantic partner review the financials monthly and walk the floor quarterly. Kevin caught this in March. He would have caught it in December if he had walked the floor in December instead of March. The theft had been running since approximately November 2022, based on what Kuhn Prassert pieced together from the partial camera footage and the purchase records. 3 months of operation at the rate they were moving units before Kevin's review caught the discrepancy. A quarterly floor walk by an independent party would have reduced that to 1 month and reduced my losses by 2/3. This is not complicated. This is what inventory controls exist for. The last thing I want to say is for the men specifically who are out here, and there are a lot of you, who have built careers with your hands, and who saved well, and who are now in your 60s, thinking about doing something active with the money, in a place where the cost of doing business is lower, and the lifestyle is better, and the possibility of actually building something in retirement seems real, rather than theoretical. That instinct is not wrong. The motorcycle market in Bangkok is real. The opportunity I identified was real. The dealership model I set up with Kevin had genuine commercial logic. None of that was wrong. What was wrong was the operational security framework I ran it with, which was a framework built on trusting the people closest to me without verification. The same way I had trusted the people closest to me for 37 years in a small Ohio shop where that trust was warranted, and where the community accountability structures of a small American city made dishonesty a more costly choice than it is in a large city where nobody knows anybody, and the export market for stolen vehicles is 20 minutes from your showroom. The rules aren't different in Bangkok. They're exactly the same as anywhere else. You protect your inventory with systems and audits and separation of duties and access controls, the same way you would in Dayton. The things that protect a business anywhere protect a business in Bangkok. I knew this. I built it badly because I was in a relationship with the person I was relying on to help me build it, and that relationship created a trust that bypassed the systems. That's on me. I'm 64. I have $303,000 and a part-time consulting gig and the knowledge of every motorcycle engine that came through the Ohio market between 1987 and 2022, which is genuinely useful to the shop I'm working with. I'm going to be all right. But I'm going to be all right in Dayton, not in Bangkok. And the difference between those two places for the next 10 or 15 years of my life is approximately $182,000 and about 6 months of anger that I am slowly converting into something I can use. You don't have to make the conversion the expensive way. That's why I'm telling you this. Get the inventory system first. Trust the people who earn it second. Not the other way around. Not the other way around. Before I get to the lessons, I want to tell you something about the motorcycle district in Bangkok specifically, because I think understanding the environment matters for understanding the vulnerability. The Wang Tonglang and Ram Kamhang corridor is a genuine, functioning, legitimate motorcycle market where hundreds of dealers operate honestly every day. The volume of transactions in that district is enormous. A unit can change hands multiple times in the course of a day. A farang, dealer buys from a supplier, puts it on the floor, sells to a customer. The customer trades in their old unit. The old unit goes back to the secondary market. This creates a transactional density that makes tracking individual units across multiple sales stages genuinely complex without dedicated systems. And that complexity is exactly what the export operations exploit. The bikes don't need to be physically stolen in the dark of night. They can be walked out the front of a legitimate dealership in broad daylight if the paperwork trail is managed carefully enough, which is what the unit at the side entrance in February told me, and which I chose not to read as what it was. The motorcycle export market in Southeast Asia is not a fringe operation. There is genuine high-volume demand for Thai model motorcycles in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and several other markets. And there is a legitimate gray market trade in second-hand units that operates through established channels with varying degrees of documentation rigor, depending on the destination country. The family operation in Lat Krabang was exploiting this legitimate gray market channel by feeding it units from dealerships where they had managed access. And the blending of the stolen units with legitimately sourced gray market stock made the export chain difficult to trace and difficult to interdict. Kuhn Prosser told me that this specific model of dealership source plus gray market export had been identified by the Commercial Vehicle Fraud Unit in at least 8 Bangkok cases in the preceding 3 years. 8 cases. I was not the first person this had happened to. I was not even the first Farang motorcycle dealer it had happened to. The dealer in all 8 prior cases had one thing in common. They had given a trusted employee physical access to the premises and inventory without a verification system that could detect unauthorized movements of units. Every single time. The scheme is not complicated. It is not sophisticated. It requires 2 things: access and the absence of controls. That's it. Access plus no controls equals the ability to walk your inventory out the door at whatever pace the export chain can absorb. Now, the lessons. And I mean these specifically. In the way that a mechanic means something specific, rather than in the way that a person giving general advice means something general. If you are opening a trade business in Thailand, any business where the inventory is physical and movable, the first thing you do before you hire anyone, before you give anyone keys, before you even finish setting up the premises, is implement a digital inventory tracking system. Every unit, VIN number logged at acquisition, status updated at every stage, physical location confirmed daily. The system should be accessible to you and to your independent accountant and to no one else without your specific authorization. The system should generate an alert if any unit's status is not updated within a defined period. This costs a few $100s and a day to set up. I know this. I was a mechanic who had run a shop for 18 years, and I know exactly how inventory control systems work. I did not implement one because I trusted the person managing my floor. That's not a valid reason not to implement a system. Systems exist precisely because trust has limits. Do not give any employee unilateral physical access to your premises without a check on that access. Physical access to a dealership means physical access to the inventory. The check can be security cameras with footage stored off-site that you and your accountant review monthly. It can be a dual key system where 2 people must be present to open the building. It can be an access log that records every entry and exit. It needs to be something, because the absence of something is the gap that the operation uses. I had cameras. Duangjai had access to the camera system and deleted the footage she needed to delete. The cameras should have been networked to an off-site storage system that she could not access. This is a basic security configuration. I did not implement it. The camera system was installed by a local contractor that Duangjai recommended. You see the problem. Do not mix your personal relationship with your business oversight. This one I want to say directly to the man who is watching this from a position where he is or is about to be romantically involved with someone who is also his primary business operator, because that man is the exact target of the scheme I was part of. The conflict of interest between romantic trust and business accountability is not something you can manage inside your own head by telling yourself that you're keeping them separate. They are not separate in practice. The moment you become emotionally invested in a person's intentions, you stop being willing to perform the verification that would tell you if those intentions are not what you believe them to be. Verification feels like distrust. Distrust feels like a failure of the relationship. So you don't verify. And the person who benefits from your not verifying, the person whose family is walking your inventory out the side door at 8 in the evening, continues to benefit month after month until someone else notices what you chose not to notice. Kevin noticed. If Kevin hadn't walked the floor in March, how long would it have gone? 3 more months? 6? The business had enough working capital to absorb the loss rate they were running for at least another year, before the numbers became obviously wrong. If Kevin hadn't walked the floor, I might have lost every unit I had and most of what I'd invested. Get a business partner who has a financial stake in the honest operation of the business, and who checks the floor independently of the person running the floor. Not a partner who checks in monthly via email. A partner who walks in unannounced. Kevin and I had that structure, and Kevin caught this. The structure saved me from losing more than I lost. I'm 64. I'm in Dayton. 3 days a week I consult for a shop on Germantown Street, and the rest of the time I rebuild old Triumphs in my garage, which is the most genuinely satisfying work I've done in years, and which costs me nothing except the parts and the hours. I have $303,000 remaining. The pension from the shop years covers the basics. I'm going to be all right. I am specifically going to be all right because Kevin walked the floor in March. The Thailand chapter was a real chapter. The motorcycle market there is real. The business idea was sound. The execution was fatally flawed by the absence of controls and the presence of a conflict of interest that I refused to see clearly. And those two things together created the vulnerability that the operation exploited. I own those failures. They were mine. But I am going to keep talking about this for as long as anyone will listen, because the operation that took 22 of my motorcycles is still running. The family in Lat Krabang is still sourcing from somewhere. The export chain is still moving units. And the next Farang who opens a dealership in Wang Tong Lang without an inventory system and a floor verification protocol is going to find out the same way I did. Don't be that person. Get the systems first. Trust the people who demonstrate they deserve it second. Not the other way around. One more thing I want to say about Duangjai specifically, because I think the human part of this story is as important as the operational part, and because I don't want to flatten her into a purely instrumental character in my own account of what happened. She was genuinely good at her job. I want to say this one more time because I think it matters. Not performatively good, not good enough to create the appearance of competence, actually skilled, actually knowledgeable, actually the best sales operator in that showroom, in a way that would have made the dealership significantly better regardless of what else was happening. The customer contacts she brought were real customers. The sales she made were legitimate sales. The numbers we hit in the first quarter were real numbers, generated by real work that she genuinely did. When she explained a motorcycle's features to a customer, she knew what she was talking about. When she priced a trade-in, she got it right. The professionalism was not a mask over an absence of competence. It was real competence that coexisted with the scheme she was running on the side. I find this the hardest part to sit with. Not the money. Not the loss of the dealership. The fact that something that was genuinely good and genuinely valuable was being used, simultaneously, as the cover for something that wasn't. The skill was real. The work was real. The relationship had something real in it. And all of that real stuff was also the mechanism of a scheme that had been designed for me specifically. For the widowed Farang mechanic with the capital and the loneliness and the trade knowledge and the absence of adequate controls. That's the thing about this kind of operation. It doesn't work without something genuine to anchor it. It needs the real competence, the real relationship, the real business success. All of it serving as the context within which the extraction operates invisibly. The most dangerous business partners are not the incompetent ones. The incompetent ones are easy to spot. The dangerous ones are the ones who are excellent at the legitimate part of what they're doing for you. Because their excellence at that part is what makes you trust them with the parts you're not watching carefully enough. Watch the parts you're not watching. Even when the parts you are watching look great, especially then. I'll leave it there. Go set up your inventory system. The 22 bikes are out there somewhere in Southeast Asia. Some of them are probably still running. That's the only part of this I almost find funny. Somewhere on a road in Cambodia or Laos, there's a motorcycle that came out of my showroom, and whoever is riding it probably has no idea where it came from. It's just a bike. It goes where they point it. So did my 82,000. I'm telling you this so the next person doesn't have to learn it the hard way. That's all I'm doing here. Pass it on. The shop on Germantown Street smells right. Like oil and metal and the specific combination of chemicals that means someone is working on something real. I'm good there. I'm genuinely good there. Some things you don't need Thailand to find. But if you're going to go find it there anyway, and I understand why you would, because Thailand is genuinely worth finding, just make sure you build the accountability structure before you build the trust. In that order. Every time. Not the other way around. Never the other way around. I mean it. Every single time.